Do you want success in your life? Of course you do. Hi, I'm Vivian Orgel, cited researcher in GQ, Vogue, Glamour, and Television. My show, Insight Express, will tell you how. We'll cover questions that arise in all areas of life and teach you how to find the answers. Get industry insider tips, improve career strategies in romance, become stronger and better at what you do, learn how to get what you want and achieve more success. Ensure your future and overcome obstacles. Experience solutions and turn insight into action on Insight Express. Join me. Hi, I'm Vivian Orgel with Johnston Castellana, and this is Insight Express.
Oh, welcome. We want to talk into Ponzi schemes and Wex trust scams. So could you actually tell us what a Ponzi is?
Well, it's when someone invests money with a company or a person and they're expecting to get a dividend or some money in return.
Okay.
But instead, the money is not coming from their account, it's coming from some other investor's account.
So is it like I'll invest money and then they'll just take it and then they'll go to someone else and get an investment and it just continues like that?
That's right. Meanwhile, they can have your money paying the laundromat bill or doing something else with it altogether different.
That's,
They may be reinvesting it, you won't know.
that sounds kind of insane, actually. The Wex trust Ponzi is this Ponzi that you were involved with, right? Could you elaborate more, like how that even started?
I wanted to invest at a higher rate, and at that time I had 2 apartments and I had a lot of money, and I was thinking of this company that I'd read a lot about, but it was all PR. What you find out later. And I found out from my accountant that the 2 people that I invested with, and it was a $60 million company, that they had already been picked up by the SEC and they were put in temporary jail up for hearing. So I didn't know that I was in a Ponzi. It turned out that I was once asked to speak at a conference for tax fraud examiners, and the person that hired me didn't know if he was in a Ponzi, and that's why he hired me, because I basically talked about what happened, and I answered a lot of questions, but it wasn't really for tax fraud examiners. It could help their clients in the way of if they saw a lot of money missing from their accounts, but it's very interesting how you can't always tell when you're in a Ponzi.
Does it start off like someone meeting you? Is it more of like you're at a bar? Like, how does that work?
It could be anywhere and anything. It's interesting that you asked me that because I have that in one of my books. Someone got a salesperson's card, and he forgot about the card. And he found it in his coat pocket one day, and he called them. So he got involved that way. Sometimes it's at a church or at a temple, or you just meet someone talking to them. I was sitting next to the man on the plane. That's how I got involved.
Really?
He was there with his wife and his children, and he actually wasn't trying to get me in. He just said to me, I have an investment company. I said, wow. I said, well, I'm looking for someone to help me back a radio show. This is like 20 years ago, or maybe 15. And he said, well, I could help you. And then I investigated, and I actually took the prospectus, which is telling you everything about the company. I took it to 2 different accountants, and both of them are very credentialed. And they said, we don't see anything wrong. Yeah.
And you just ended up having it like.
Yep.
That's insane. So, could you define like what type of person that is? Like someone who would, I guess, have you interested in some sort of investment that ends up becoming a Ponzi?
Well, it's someone that is generally a risk taker, someone who's also very sly, smooth talking, a white collar kind of person.
Okay.
Someone who wants to get away with something.
Yeah.
I have a little story for you. I went out with a guy once, and he started telling me about his son, and his son committed insurance fraud. And I asked him a little bit about it. It kind of scared me because I didn't want to date him again after that. And he told me when he was a little boy, he found his son going through all the drawers. It was like a little revelation. I think a lot of kids go through drawers too, but he didn't stop. He was always looking for something that he could take. So that developed in childhood, and he was caught.
Yeah, eventually.
I can't say it's more men than women, but generally I think that's what they publicize.
Yeah, that more men will be involved, that will get people like swindled into a Ponzi. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah.
Okay. And then you were talking about doing research. Is there like a certain amount you do or a certain quality of research that you need? Could you tell us more on that? Like what's required to understand like if you're actually in one or potentially in one compared to not?
Well, you definitely don't want to take someone at their word. You have to get opinions. And in my case, I got 2 accountants' opinions. But later I found out, because I'm an investor turned investigator, I found out that you need to know what court to look for if you want to look into their background. So in other words, if you live in Virginia and this person who took your money is in Virginia, it doesn't mean that they were caught in Virginia. They could have been caught in Ohio. So you have to know what court, or it's not even going to show up.
So you're
You got to
basically
do a lot of research.
And then, is there any like specific person you need to go to, or is there any specific like website you need to go to just like conduct this research, or is
I generally advise people to get an investigator. If you're going to put like $200,000 down or more, or even less than that, if it matters, of course, you want to go to an investigator because they can get into all the records quickly. Especially with AI today, you might even be able to do some research yourself. As a matter of fact, I once looked up on Google and I found somebody on there that was doing wrong.
so we were going along like background. So is there any like certain types of background we need to look into, credentials that proves that they're a proper investment or which whatever?
Well, they have to be registered with the United States Security and Exchange Commission as a broker-dealer and an investment advisor, or they're individual financial advisors and they work with a firm. And that's called a CFP, Certified Financial Planner. And there are other credentials that they need. These people are very smart. That's not the problem. The thing is that they're greedy and they want to scam and take the shortcut.
Okay, so there are organizations we can look towards that would prove that a company or an investment has credentials.
Yes.
Beautiful.
And if they're not in good standing as well.
Oh, okay. So, what can you elaborate like how like on good standing they would be, like what that means exactly?
Well, I'll just say if there's a rating 1 to 5 and 1 is not good, they might put a 1. Like the Better Business Bureau might list different people.
So there's essentially like a tier list on where everyone stands, so you know if they're a good or bad investment. Actually, I like that. And then, do they have any form of does a good investment have any form of like responsibilities that they would uphold compared to what a Ponzi wouldn't?
They're really just an investment that is just they're hiding what they're doing.
Okay.
You know, all companies can hide what they're doing because they're managed by the company.
Yeah.
But it's just a matter of when a Ponzi is something where they're taking from one person to pay another. And by the way, our Ponzi was not a full Ponzi. I have to make a correction. The company that I invested with had 90+% real estate investments, real buildings. And the way that they got caught actually was that they sold a piece of paper. There was no building.
Wow.
And I remember when I was looking for my investment, after the 2 accountants, I called the police and a real estate broker in the same town where the building was, and I wanted to make sure the building was real.
Yeah.
Somebody else went directly to Chicago, and she saw it was a real hotel. So they had real assets. This was not a full Ponzi, but they categorized it as, because they did pay us from other people's paychecks.
And then, by what I was told, they also were trying to invest in other quote unquote things. Do you know any of those, or could you elaborate on like what those are?
Well, this company sent a letter out to a lot of the people who invested. Not everyone got it. I got it. And I saw the double talk. They were saying, well, we're in a really bad time in the world because basically the subprime mortgages were all defaulting. And so people were losing their homes
Right.
because the mortgage companies were giving anybody a mortgage. They didn't care. It was just a game that they were playing, and they got caught.
Yeah.
And people lost their houses. And this was a real estate company, so they lost a lot of money.
Something big impact type things.
Yep,
Yeah.
yep. In fact, Brad Pitt was in a movie called The Big Short. It was a great movie. It was all about that. The company lost all this money, and they were trying to hide it. And I saw that in the letter, and I said to myself, I'm going to go down there and see them. And I did, and I went down, and all the people that were at the front desk were missing. And then I also saw that they didn't send everyone the letter because I was very involved in getting back over $5.5 million for everyone through the SEC from an attorney that worked with me throughout the Ponzi. So, answering your question, there are ways to see things, but sometimes you don't see them until they crack.
That's interesting. So it's really like underlying for the most part, and then it's like, bam,
Yeah.
it's like there.
Yeah. Well, getting back to the part that the subprime mortgages were collapsing, I was getting $1,500 a month on my investment, and it never changed. Now, how could it not change if the whole system is collapsing? That's one thing to look for. You have to know what's happening in the other markets.
It's like stocks, essentially.
Yeah,
You know, stocks
yeah.
go up and down, so your return should go up and down as well.
So if the market for housing is collapsing, you're not going to get the same return.
Yeah, you should get something different.
Happening.
Oh my goodness.
I was happy. I'm getting $1,500. The rest of the world is suffering, not me.
Yeah.
You know? Yeah.
Forget those people.
Yeah.
So
Well, you don't know. You know?
yeah. So I'm assuming you have to sign some form of contract or some form of agreement with these investors and investments. So what is it that you look for on the contract when you're reading it? What are the telltale signs that say like, you know, I should probably back out now?
I didn't see any, and neither did the two other accountants. They looked at everything for me. Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
ridiculous. So
Well, you know, these people are smart. They hire attorneys. They make sure that everything is correct. I mean, even the timeshare, you can't get out of a timeshare so easily because the way they language it.
okay, that kind of reminds me of like how there's a ballot for the casino at Portsmouth, and the way they worded it, it was almost as if it was very ambiguous, you know.
That's a problem right
Yeah,
there.
yeah. So within itself, it's like okay, it says like, do you want this built kind of in this area, but not really? And so we didn't really know how to answer that question because it was very ambiguous. So it's it with like talk like that. Is that something you can see within a contract? Is there a chance that
You
you
wouldn't
see?
see it. You wouldn't see something that ambiguous.
If they're real sly and smart about
Yeah,
it. Okay.
no. They are stating generic questions
Okay. Yeah.
that
Yeah.
protect them.
Yeah. So it's nothing
It's
specific.
not necessarily going to protect the investor.
Is there any form of information that you will give compared that you won't give? You know, because I know nothing about investments, so you know I don't know if my like 401k is involved or my like Social Security is involved or my medical history. So is there anything there that could be involved?
That's a very good point. Not that I know of, but I will tell you when I was talking to you before that I said something about Social Security. What happens is when you go to an appointment for a doctor, they say to you, you know, are you responsible for payment, et cetera, and you give your medical information.
Right.
I never fill in a Social Security number. And if you think about it, there was a show that used to show a lot of crimes. And people get into computers, people look into the garbage. If they want to find out information that's not always available, they can.
Yeah.
So you don't know who the people are behind the front desk that are taking your application. So don't put your Social Security in unless it's mandatory, including an investment. That's my belief.
Yeah. I mean, it's valid. You know, like, you never know what people are going to do in the shadows, so it's always something.
They're not bonded.
And is there any other like? So you're talking about like your accountants. You know, should we like consult a lawyer? Should we consult other people? Who do we consult or who do we talk to just to get more insight and information on if we are in one, potentially going to be in one, or
Well, I figured out, because this Ponzi lasted 10 years, I figured out quite quickly, probably within the first 6 months, that all the letter writing that you crunched out without sleep, with acid in your stomach, all that didn't help at all.
No.
Because they already have this preordained ruling of how they operate, these Ponzi's in court.
yeah,
So we knocked our head against the wall many times. But the first person that announced to a private group, which I was in, that our money was being stolen by the man put in charge, he's called a receiver. He didn't want his name to be mentioned, and
Yeah.
and I was like, but I want everyone out there to know that we're involved in a Ponzi because we need help.
yeah,
I was saying we should petition in front of the courts, but no one wanted to do that.
no,
And I really didn't want my name to be out there, but I did get interviewed on several different news programs. And so when I was fighting, and I fought for not myself, I fought for everybody, I found out that there's something called holdbacks, where they don't pay all the money to the person in charge all at once. And at the very end, there was $25 million held back.
wow,
And because I was in touch with the SEC attorney from my appeal before I got too deep, and I worked with him, he ended up giving us back $5.5 million. But before the end, I went to several attorneys. They even wrote my forward and my appeal. No matter who I spoke to, they made it very clear, you can't really win. And I saw other people fighting, like you mentioned before, like sometimes they get into other things. In this Ponzi, they started diverting their attention towards Africa and diamond mines. And they did that because they were in a hole. And we didn't know that they were in a hole, except I figured it out. A couple of people did. And in fact, one of the girls that was on the 6-person Ponzi, I call it, well, we were on the Ponzi crusade. I grabbed a couple of people. One was from the Midwest, from Virginia. One was from New York. And we all went to court. And we learned a lot there. We learned that the receiver set us up. He's supposed to, by law, to tell us what he's going to talk about.
Yeah.
He didn't think that we would show up at the hearing, and we only got the information the night before. And so when we were in court, and he was reported from the IRS as never sending the letters that he said he did, I was picked on, and I stood up and I said, and I pointed at him, and I've never done anything like this publicly or even at all. I said, you mean you spent $500,000 of our money and you didn't get results? So, we had an inside look.
Yeah.
And so many things were happening that were really not typical. Like somebody who was in the game who was supposed to take care of a $60 million problem
Yeah.
didn't follow through.
My
And they
goodness.
hired someone else, and she won. She only won 11 million.
Yeah.
And then she died. And then the receiver was found on the ground, dead. He had fallen with a suitcase, literally to the ground. And then this big accounting firm, they went bankrupt, was called back into court, and I think they had something going on together, and I think he was killed during my Ponzi. I still have a lot of these notes.
Yeah, so most definitely. So by what I'm hearing, there are groups you could go to, for sure. There,
Just to learn the basics.
Yeah,
That's about all you can.
well, just to get that a better understanding and just like a way to protect yourself properly.
Well, I don't know if you can really ever protect yourself. Once you give your money, it's like a crapshoot. They could say, we're going to do this, that, and the other, and, he gets killed in a car accident.
Yeah.
He lent the money to his mother. You don't know what's really going to happen.
Yeah, I hear that. And
It's a risk.
are there any forms of like literature, any form of like books that you can most definitely go to as a resource for that?
I am sure that you can find things online. I also wrote 2 books.
Okay.
Or I wrote the Scam Report, which is about all types of scams, but I
Okay.
also wrote Betrayed Investors Tell All. And then I have I did a PowerPoint at a couple of different seminars where I was invited again for tax fraud examiners, where I really went into depth.
Wow. Well, that's amazing. Yeah, I really appreciate like the knowledge about Ponzi's and investment schemes and like how they function and I guess like the ins and outs, like the quote unquote insight, roll credits, and the insight of what Ponzi's are. I really appreciate the information.
Well, you really don't know until you've been in one. That's the real truth of it.
Yeah.
But there are some people that have reported information, but most people don't want to be, they don't want to say that they were involved in something. The same with dating scams. No one wants to say I was scammed,
Yeah.
But I was okay about it.
Just because all the information that we have here it's proof that there are things that you can use as a fundamental resource for recourse to just be able to prevent yourself from being scammed at this level.
Well, you just said the word recourse. I wanted to point out that a lot of people hired attorneys, a lot,
Yeah.
and they spent a fortune, and they didn't do it. They didn't get anything out of it. Nothing positive came out of it.
You would think.
Yeah. But an attorney, attorneys in the world, an attorney will take your money unless they're very honest, because they know that you're not going to win.
Yeah, I don't like that. I'm not a fan of that.
No, me neither.
But this is great, grand information. I really appreciate you coming out, telling the people how it works, how it functions, really spreading that knowledge out.
Well, we all need to find the most important information, and of course, there's more.
Right.
Look at my site, Vivian Orgel on fraud.com. Vivian Orgel on fraud.com. And there are several books on scams as well as the Ponzi.
This will be the end of our podcast. We'll probably post episodes weekly if we can, and we will see you on the next one. Bye-bye.